Blue Origin is leaping ahead of the competition with plans to take its first commercial tourist into space. The firm owned by the world's richest man, Jeff Bezos, has started taking bids for what'll be a short but historic trip. Paolo Montecillo reports.
It'll be the ultimate post-pandemic mini break. Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin is auctioning off a ticket to space on its new Shepard rocket.
So for all of you out there who have said, I can't wait to go to space, I've got some good news for you. The wait is over.
The suborbital journey will be the world's first commercial space tourism flight, 60 years after Russian pilot Yuri Gagarin became the first person in space. Those who followed him into orbit are looking forward to the next great leap.
I think it's very exciting that more and more people are going to have access to space in the coming years.
Yeah, we've always enjoyed this incredible thing called space, but we always want more people to be able to experience it as well. So I think this is a great step in the right direction.
American businessman Dennis Tito took the first ever out-of-this-world holiday in 2001. He paid $20 million for a seat on a Russian government rocket and a week-long stay at the International Space Station. The Blue Origin flight will be a lot shorter, at around 11 minutes. It'll also be cheaper.
And touchdown. Welcome back.
While the final price will be determined by the top bid, rival space firm Virgin Galactic has already set a benchmark. Richard Branson's firm is selling $250,000 tickets for 90-minute flights starting later this year. Blue Origin says its first customer will be paying for more than just the experience.
He or she will write him or herself into the history books, not just of spaceflight, but of history. And on top of that, they're opening the doors for other space explorers to pass through behind them.
According to UBS, space tourism could be worth $3 billion by 2030. But the Swiss bank says with better technology and lower costs, spacecraft could eventually compete with planes for long-haul trips around the world. A futuristic business with profit potential that's more than just sky high, it's astronomical. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
Well, let's get more on this now with space policy and aerospace industry analyst William Gibson. He's also an economics professor at the University of Vermont, and he joins us now from Burlington. Good to have you back on the program, Professor. Now, Blue Origin's announcement took many people by surprise, I think, because I don't think many people realised just how advanced this particular project was. But if and when this flight does take place in July, it won't be taking the passenger around the Earth, will it?
I think that's the most important point to make here. There are pluses and minuses about that. First, thinking about what you have to do to get into low Earth orbit versus what you have to do to get to 100 kilometers above the Earth, two radically different things. The difference in energy is about a factor of 30. And if you think about it, all you really have to do is if you throw a baseball up in the air, it's going to come back down, but at some point it's just going to be at zero velocity. Now, when you're trying to orbit, you have to be at Mach 25 in order to go into orbit. And so what Jeff Bezos is doing is really a lot easier than trying to put spacecraft in orbit. That's why it's so much cheaper. But I also want to say that it's a lot safer, because if you think about it, your re-entry into the atmosphere is not compounded by the extreme velocities that an orbital spacecraft would experience. So this is not a bad idea. This is really a good idea to start at this level. It's equivalent to flying your new airplane, as the Wright brothers did on a sandy beach, as opposed to something more complicated.
So these suborbital trips will be out of the reach of most people other than the very wealthy. We heard there that Virgin Galactic, who's also planning on launching a suborbital trip later this year, they'll be charging upwards of $250,000 per trip. So why should the average citizen, average person really care about a commercial spaceflight?
Well, if you think about it, J.P. Morgan also in the 1800s, in the 1880s, decided he was going to try out a new form of lighting called electricity. So he got the Edison company to come and install a generator in his backyard and ran quite a few lights. And it wasn't until a couple of years later, in 1882, that the rest of the neighborhood had also around 400 bulbs that they shared. And it wasn't until 1925 that 50% of the houses in the United States had electricity. So, okay, don't care about spacecraft and going into orbit right now. But look what happened to electricity. Look what happened to aviation. In 1917, the first commercial flight charged $400. That was about a 2-year salary, equivalent to about a 2-year salary. So yeah, these cutting edge technologies always very expensive. This is one advantage of, if you will, a bad distribution of income, because if we didn't have people with these kinds of resources, we would not be breaking through these barriers.
When Jeff Bezos announced that he was stepping down as CEO of Amazon later this year, part of the reason he gave was that so he could focus on Blue Origin, on really developing his space flight commercial venture. But he's got a lot of catching up to do, doesn't he? Because SpaceX, Elon Musk's company, is really miles ahead in terms of commercializing space flight and other operations in space.
Well, he's on a different point on the demand curve. As you just pointed out, they're going for orbital space, and that is going to be about 100 times more expensive than what Bezos is doing. But it's also important to note that Jeff Bezos is not trying to make money as as the provider of space tourism services, unlike Richard Branson, for example. Bezos has got bigger things in mind. He's doing what is called development pathfinding. He's not trying to finance. He's not trying to finance any particular project like Elon Musk is to get to get to Mars. What Bezos would really like to do is take advantage of space more generally, not only to preserve the species, as Gerard K. O'Neill observed, but also to take advantage of the resources that are there, the minerals, the metal, the power, the real estate. These are things that humanity will ultimately need, will take advantage of, and Bezos is trying to do that. He's not trying to make money in space tourism. At least that's what it looks like right now. That's very different from Richard Branson and the Virgin spacecraft. That is much more oriented toward the actual activity of space tourism. And so we've got two players in this market whose ultimate goal is not to provide space tourist services. It's a very interesting development.
Sure is. Okay, Professor William Gibson, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you again for joining us on the program.